To the Black Kings Connect podcast guests and co-creators in the podcast Connection Consortium program, hi. I'm Greg Roland, and I'm a marketing specialist and brand strategist with BKC, and we share something special. A few things, actually. We're both connected to the podcast as guest, listener, strategizer, and co-creator. If you're anything like me, you wear multiple hats. You're a creator, an artist, an entrepreneur, a dreamer, and an influencer. You have goals to positively influence your communities, and you have the talent, the skills, and the core competencies to do just that. If you're anything like me, being a community connector is important to you. If you're anything like me, you want to be at your best so you can continue to give value to the people around you. And all this requires growth. When it comes to growth, it's important that number one, you know yourself, and number two, you become connected. You need both in order to grow successfully. Only one isn't sustainable. If you've ever applied for a job, you know that both are important. If you've ever pursued a dream, you know that having both is important. If you've ever sought to navigate a challenge within family or finances, start a business, or complete a personal project, you know that having both self-knowledge and connectedness are important. Our podcast is all about conversation centering around empowerment, so I want to invite someone special to the couch for a quick conversation. Myself. Hey there, welcome. Thank you. You look familiar. I hope so. Well, thanks for being here and having a conversation. My pleasure. Yeah, well, I want to get right into it and ask you a few questions and then give you space to think it through and answer. As you know, the podcast is all about conversations. So let's get started. What do you dream about, and when do you feel the most empowered? Yes, great question. What do I dream about, and when do I feel most empowered? So let me start with the second question, when do I feel most empowered? I think a succinct way to put that, I feel most empowered when I feel most connected, when I'm connected to other people, family, friends, an understanding of what it is that I want to do and what I'm pursuing at the moment, but also connected to myself. And I think that last part, what I just said, demonstrates that. Being connected to yourself, having clarity around your goals, your passions, to be able to give you the roadmap, if you will, the way forward, and then the understanding of what resources might be available or might be necessary to help you accomplish that. And I think oftentimes when I embark on my creative projects as a writer, as a performer, as a singer, as somebody who loves marketing and media, oftentimes what I'm trying to do really involves other people. And I like to think that I have a robust network, but all the time that's not the case. So being connected to people is really important. And then also having self-confidence, self-assurance, and clarity on what it is that I'm pursuing gives me the ability to either yes or say no to certain opportunities that may come up. So I feel most empowered when I have that connectedness to myself and other people. And then as far as what I dream about, I touched on that a little bit of, I really do feel that I have the ability and the skills to influence people positively, as a writer, as a singer, as a producer, as a marketer. I really do find my passion for influencing people positively. I feel that I have a message and the skills to do that. So I look for opportunities to make that happen, and I'm grateful for anybody who likewise gives me an opportunity to do the same. Wow, that's really insightful of you. Thanks again for being here. Oh yeah, anytime. I wanted to show you that conversation with myself to demonstrate something. That knowing yourself is important, that we all have different aspects to our identity, and we all desire growth and impact. Everyone's looking for ways to grow and improve, whether it's concerning family, finances, or relationships as examples. Yet the actual lived experience within those areas looks different for each and every individual. That intersectionality can prove difficult when networks are small, because having knowledge of what one needs without access to resources makes for a frustrating lived experience. Similarly, having an abundance of connections without having clarity on which one is most appropriate creates confusion and frustration within that lived experience. BKC seeks to provide both access to a greater pool of resources as well as the tools to empower greater self and others' awareness. For you as podcast guest and Connection Consortium member, we want you to be empowered to grow to your greatest potential, to be a trusted influencer for your own networks, and to be an ally to your goals. As you mobilize your networks to connect with BKC, your networks have a greater chance at finding access to the right resources needed for their lived experience, because they're not just connecting to us, but our network as well. As we grow, so do they, and so do you. To give a little context and clarity, let's look at some data. If we take into account all of the followers that our Season 1 podcast guests have, that number totals to 12,295 followers. Even if we reduce that number by 10% to account for possible duplicate follows, the number still lies north of 11,000 individuals. So far, we're building a respectable following as we approach only 1 month of released podcast episodes. So far, we've released 2 episodes in the last month, and we've grown our subscriber base to 37 across at least 5 platforms. We've also achieved a 4.7 out of 5 rating on Apple Podcasts, which is our largest listener percentage. We also received this rave review about the influence that our podcast has on one of our listeners named Alex, saying, "This show has everything." We've just gotten started, but the future is bright and we have a tremendous opportunity to continue our growth. Those 11,000 followers across our 9 Season 1 podcast guests can be leveraged to help our message of empowerment reach more people. But it can also be leveraged to help you, our podcast guest and Connection Consortium members, grow your own platforms, reach, and influence. We want you to grow to your highest potential, and often that growth happens in conversations with others and with yourself. That growth happens when we expand our circles, we see and hear new perspectives, and we support one another. Our podcast is built upon a foundation of empowerment, empathy, impact, and influence. And the data proves that Black Kings Connect is making a difference and has enormous potential to keep growing to empower the masses. There's another story that demonstrates the kind of empowerment that Black Kings Connect brings to the table. It's a true story, and it features one of our podcast hosts, Nick. The full story can be found here and in the link below, but allow me to summarize it for you. When our podcast host Nick was a student academic advisor at UVA, he had a conversation with one student that changed that student's life. Let's call that student Ephraim. Ephraim was scheduled to come and speak with Nick about how to improve his academic performance because he wasn't doing so well. Nick was preparing for the meeting and he didn't anticipate it lasting more than 5 minutes, as all that was needed for that day was to print out some forms for Ephraim and take them with him and fill them out. Nick was ready to take off for his lunch break after this meeting when Ephraim walks into the room, and Nick, being much more than an academic advisor, notices that something is wrong. Nick notices that Ephraim was looking down, depressed, and saddened. Upon asking Ephraim what the problem was, they started a conversation, and Nick realized that Ephraim was lacking a little bit of self-confidence and he wasn't quite seeing the value that he had. So Nick tells Ephraim, "I want you to take out a piece of paper and a pen, and I want you to write down 5 positive words or phrases about yourself." Ephraim proceeds to do this, and when he writes down those 5 words and phrases, he looks at Nick, and Nick responds, "Now what I want you to do is I want you to write 'I am' in front of each of those phrases and words." Ephraim does this and again looks at Nick, and Nick replies, "Now I want you to say those phrases out loud 5 times. Ephraim begins to say these phrases out loud, and one by one, Nick notices at the beginning, nothing really changes. Ephraim says it the first time, no change. Ephraim says it the second time, no change. When Ephraim says it the third time, he starts to change a little bit. He starts to get a little bit more confident, and Nick notices that his body language changes. Ephraim says it one more time, starting to get a little bit more confidence and noticeable improvement in his demeanor. By the time he finishes it for the 5th time, Ephraim is already noticeably different. He's more confident and he's more empowered. Nick says to Ephraim, I want you to do this exercise for the next 30 days. Come back and we'll talk again. 30 days pass by and Ephraim comes back in Nick's room looking like a changed man. The day he comes back is a career fair, so Ephraim is wearing a suit, having just come from the career fair, and he walks in beaming with excitement and confidence, standing tall and projecting his voice. Ephraim tells Nick that he just received a job offer, and when they review the academic performance profile together, Ephraim's grades approved across the board. From that simple conversation, Ephraim undoubtedly grew and became better for it. There's a similar story from our second podcast host, James, which you can hear in full here, links above and below. You'll hear a similar story about how James empowered one of his academic advisees simply by having a conversation and allowing his advisee to voice and vocalize his concerns. These stories hopefully communicate something that everyone who gets connected to us grows in one way or another. We're humbled to have an opportunity to help everyone we connect with benefit in some way. There's one more story about somebody who's benefited by being connected to Black Kings Connect. That person had a need and BKC came and provided him with an opportunity. That person got connected to BKC and has changed his life for the better. That person is me. At the beginning of my time in the program, when we needed to decide what our marketing challenge projects were, I was having a hard time doing that. The deadline was approaching and it was the day before we needed to make final decisions, and I still hadn't finalized what I was going to work on. I had gone through my mental exercise and thinking about one option after another, and nothing seemed plausible as my own circle was too small to find a suitable project for me. And out of the blue, one of my friends sent me a text message and he asked, Greg, are you working on any marketing projects? And I replied, no. And I asked him why he was asking me about the marketing projects. Well, he told me about this project he was working on, starting, called Black Kings Connect. It was a new business and the first product was going to be a podcast. He told me that as he was taking on more responsibilities as podcast host, developing conversation topics, and working on procuring guests, he needed somebody to help him with the marketing, that he couldn't do it by himself. And when he told me that he was thinking about different people to reach out to ask, as he was contemplating and praying and pondering, only one name came to his mind. And that was my name. My name. How fortuitous of an opportunity that was for me. To be facing a deadline, to be facing stress, to be facing anxiety, and my friend reached out to me with an opportunity. And I took that opportunity and ran with it. I was able to do all of the marketing and branding and strategy for Black Kings Connect and the podcast. I was able to use my videography skills and my artistry to create videos and to curate content on social media. One of those videos that I created to help promote the podcast was reshared by the Webby Awards to their 80,000 followers on Instagram. I also got to use my music skills in creating a song for the podcast to be the official theme song. And now every time you listen to the podcast, in the opening theme and ending theme, you're going to hear my song. As I begin to share my involvement and be excited about my connection to Black Kings Connect, people in my own network started to give me feedback. One of my friends told me that one of their friends listened to my song and it inspired them to get back into music after a 10-year hiatus. That means a lot to me. Somebody who had not touched music and created music for 10 years listened to my song that I created for the podcast and was inspired to begin again. Being connected to Black Kings Connect changed my life. We know that you know yourself. Now, get connected to us like I connected to Black Kings Connect, so you can accomplish your goals and we can better connect the world and help them to do the same. Like me, I hope you see the value of being more deeply connected to the Black Kings Connect podcast beyond listener and guest. That being connected to us and helping us grow can help you grow too. At BKC, we invite you to do a similar exercise. Engage yourself in conversation and ask yourself, when do you feel most empowered? What it is that you want to do and dream about? And as you ponder those questions, also ponder how helping our growth helps yours. Thanks for listening.